Hello, I'm Dr. Laura Aydelotte, an unusually educated woman from the 16th century. I'm here today to tell you a little bit about the people who made, read, and owned books in the period from the Middle Ages through the Renaissance, or the 12th through the 17th centuries. This video is a part of the TOME project, or the Toolkit of Material Evidence for Rare Books, a project created by the Clark Library, UCLA, and Penn Libraries. First, I'll tell you about how books were made. Hello. Now I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the makers of books. The TOME project is interested in the marks that were made in books after the initial text was created. In the case of manuscript, that means after the main text was written out by a pen or a quill like this, or in the case of printed books, after they came off the presses. In the case of medieval manuscripts, obviously everything was written by hand. There were no printing presses, and we didn't have computers yet, so you were using a quill like this. And people used a variety of natural substances to create and decorate manuscripts. These, for example, are iron galls that were made to create iron gall ink, the ink that was often used for the main part of the text in an early manuscript. Other materials, like these buckthorn berries or saffron, were used to create pigments like yellow. And then you had very expensive materials, like this lapis lazuli that would make a really beautiful blue color for an illumination or a painted image in a medieval manuscript, or cinnabar that produced red colors. And of course, the most precious thing you could do was to add gold to your manuscript. Sometimes you would use gold leaf that was real gold pressed very thin that would then be glued down to the page of the book. Another option was shell gold, where you would mix gum arabic and ground up gold pigment in a shell like this, which is why it's called shell gold. Materials like this were used to produce books like this Bible, produced around 1300. I'll show you this book in detail in a minute, but first I just want you to note the size of the book. This is a very large format Bible. The pages are made out of vellum, or animal skin, that's been stretched very thin. And as I said before, you use your iron gall ink to create this main text in the middle of the page. And then these other kinds of materials were used to decorate. Let's take a closer look at that Bible we were just examining. Here's a page from the manuscript. You can see that all of this text has been handwritten. And the marks that people have added include these beautiful scrolls decorated with gold leaf. So all of the gold color that you see in this illuminated initial and the other illuminations on this page is real gold that's been pounded down very fine and applied to the page. You'll also notice things like this red lettering in the middle of the page. So red ink is what's called rubrication, which means to make red. And red ink would be used to identify particularly important parts of the text. In this case, in a Bible, maybe the start of a chapter or the words of Christ. That's why you'll sometimes see in modern Bibles the words of Christ are still written or printed in red. There are other things in this book that you wouldn't necessarily expect to see in a Bible. For example, here on the bottom, you can see this charming picture of a rabbit that somebody's drawn into this text of the Bible. And there's a lot of images in this book that are similarly unexpected. This page, near the start of the book, includes some very fanciful creatures, such as this elaborate dragon in the corner. Books were made in Europe changed around the latter part of the 15th century. Johannes Gutenberg produced his Gutenberg Bible around the year 1450. And a book like this, the Nuremberg Chronicle, a large book filled with illustrations and beautiful text produced in the new printing method, was produced in the year 1493. Such books are called incunables, that is, books from the first 50 years of printing from about 1450 to 1501. I'm going to talk a little bit first about how printing worked in the early period using my handy handheld printing press. Then we're going to look a little bit at the kinds of marks that people made in early printed books. So now I'm going to use my handy handheld printing press, which also doubles as a pencil sharpener, as a way of showing you the basics of how printing was done in the early modern period. So you would have your type or engraving or whatever you wanted to print set up down here. So this is where the metal type or the image that you wanted to create would go. Then you'd have your paper set up here. You'd fold that down on top of it. You'd obviously put ink on here. You'd have these roller balls that you would coat with ink and put the ink onto the type or the engraving. Push it back here, and then somebody takes this lever and pulls it like this. And on a real press, this would then push this part down so that it presses down with some weight on top of your paper and your type. And then you push it back out. And voila, you have a printed image of the thing that you had set up at the type here. At first glance, you might look at this book, at the fact that it's on vellum, that it has this old-fashioned looking writing. You can see the ruled lines where a manuscript creator would have made the lines to keep his lines straight. And you've got this embellishment with this gold pigment in this little initial here. And throughout, you can see these beautiful illuminated hand-done images. So you might think that this particular book was a manuscript, but it's not. It's all a printed book. You can see if we zoom in, this is what we call a hybrid book of hours, meaning a mix of manuscript and print elements. So the page itself has been printed and made to look as though it were a manuscript. They're trying to, in this early age of printing, imitate a lot of the design and traditions that you would have seen in hand-done books, because those were the books that people still thought of as expensive and beautiful and desirable. And then you would add these illuminated or painted details to make them even more like a manuscript. In this book from the 15th century, which is again an incunable, you can see the transition between printed images and text like these and manuscript traditions like the filling in of this halo with gold leaf, the addition of these initial letters, and sometimes in early printed books you'll see a blank square where an initial letter should go, and that's because it was printed that way so that it could be filled in by hand later. So the idea is that these books were designed to be then decorated by hand. And this hybrid book of ours is especially interesting because bound into the back is a quire of actual manuscript leaves. So you can compare here on the left, you have the printed book with the manuscript editions. And again, some of these drawn in these lines so that they look like guidelines for the text. And on the right, you have a manuscript page where you can see the kind of manuscript hand that this printed text is copying. In this case, it's possible that the manuscript was trying to look just like the printed version. I'm not sure. And again, you can see that they've got consistent sort of decoration in these added manuscript pages, which go to the end here. This video is a part of the TOME project, or the Toolkit of Material Evidence in Rare Books. The project is created by the Kislak Center for Special Collections, Rare Books, and Manuscripts at the University of Pennsylvania Libraries and the Clark Library at UCLA. It is made possible by generous support from the Council on Library and Information Resources, or CLIR, and the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation. You now know more about the material evidence added to books and manuscripts by the people who made them. Check out the next videos to learn more about the kinds of marks that owners and readers made in books and manuscripts from the medieval and early modern period.